Hello and welcome back to Global Desi Women, where we spotlight bold voices, untold stories from Indian women around the world who are breaking barriers and redefining success and living a life on their own terms. I'm your host, Arti Solanki, a real estate broker at Living Large Realty, a business coach for women entrepreneurs, and an author of a book, Hindu Rituals. And along with me is my lovely co host, Bhavana Shelley, a business analyst, and Bhawna Luthra, a family and marriage therapist. We are here to bring fresh insights and thoughtful questions as we dive into another meaningful conversation. Today's guest is someone who really shows what it means to be brave, clear, and willing to start over. Please welcome Maneesha Ahluwalia, a woman who left behind a successful medical career, a marriage, and even the idea of becoming a mother, not to rebel, but to follow a life that felt more true to who she is. So let's get comfy, grab a cup of chai, and let's dive into a powerful conversation with Maneesha about choosing yourself and rewriting your story and stepping into a life that truly is yours. Welcome, Manisha. I really appreciate you coming on to our show. And I'm super excited to hear your story, your journey, and really, understanding what goes behind making such a huge shift in your life and not just in your professional but also in your personal life. So I'm really appreciating that you coming out and telling your story to us. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and we have, like I said, Luthra and Shelley today with us, both Pamna. So we're going to call them by their last names. So no confusion there. So let's get started. Manisha, tell us a little bit about yourself. And I know that you are professionally, like you were a physician and being a doctor and changing your career into a life coach. What was that mindset? And I know there's a lot deeper story behind that, but let's just start with that. Let's just begin with that.
So yeah, it's what was the mindset? The mindset was that something doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel like what I'm supposed to be doing. And once I experienced being coached as a client and had the light bulb idea, well, maybe I could give this a try because my medical career was not fulfilling. I went into the certification process to become a coach. And when I started coaching practice clients, it became very clear
Mm.
that this was the calling bigger than being a physician.
Yeah.
And that was all I needed to know. It was just this intuitive knowing that I think a lot of women just get. And I think that's what happened.
Yeah, and it's a leap of faith, right? Because a lot of women, we don't really listen to that. And we have that hesitation. We have that fear of what if I made this change? What will happen? How it is going to impact me or how it's going to impact my family. But people like you, that leap of faith when you take that action and it changes so much dynamically. And that's what we need to hear more, right? So tell us now. I think we can start the conversation about. Tell us a little bit about your story, how that journey began from being a physician to a life coach. I know there's a very deeper story to that. So share that story with us.
Yeah, well, why did I even seek the help of a coach? Because I was plugging along in my medical career. I was married. We were starting to think about starting a family. But the backstory to that is important because when my ex husband and I met, I was one of these people who was volunteering internationally. I was working with Doctors Without Borders. I was in Kenya and Cambodia. And then I was back. I met this guy and he's Indian. We met, and he was a humanitarian at heart too. He was actually returning from the Peace Corps. He had been in Macedonia for some time. And when we met, it just seemed like a great match. And one of the conversations we had, I remember clearly standing on a balcony in Cambodia having Skype conversations with this guy I had only known for 3 weeks physically. And then I went away to Cambodia. And we had this conversation about children because, we were getting deep into our relationship, and we had a conversation and we said, well, if we're both interested in this volunteer work and humanitarian work, then perhaps we live a life that's child free. And we both were on the same page. And a year later, we found ourselves married in Uganda on our first mission together with Doctors Without Borders. And people in our community, like his cousins, my cousins, friends, they were having their first, their second, their third child. And something awakened in him, is all I can say. And he changed his mind and wanted to have children. And our marriage troubles began there. And here I was, in my work situation back in the US. We were working back in the US again. And working as a physician in the US is challenging. And we can get into all of that later. But I just didn't feel like I had time with people. I didn't have time to talk with patients. Then on the personal side, we were in discord, just there was not harmony in the marriage. He wanted one thing, I wanted a different thing. And how do you reconcile those two very different desires? And we worked through that with 3 years of counseling. That didn't work. Then I decided to go through with, trying to have children, fertility treatments, long story. And my health was suffering. Mentally, I wasn't really in a good place because there was so much discourse in our relationship to somebody that I really felt is my soulmate in the way that we met, in the interest that we had, and like just our life stories. So, anyway, long story short, I really felt like I wanted some help. And I was hearing in the physician community that people are either transitioning into coaching careers or hiring coaches. There were so many burnout coaching programs for physicians. And so I enrolled in one and experienced life as a client of a coach, and these thoughts that I think were inside of me, but I didn't really give them voice. Like I would hear white women say things, and I was like, "Oh, are we allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Are we allowed to say like I can do whatever I want? I can dress however I want. I can work in medicine however I want. I can predict. I can make my own schedule. I can decide if I want to have children. I can decide if I want to be married." Like all these ideas that I think I had, and maybe a lot of other Indian women too have these ideas inside of us. And like you were saying before, there's a voice, but we sort of suppress it. And so when I started hearing white women say these things, I was like, well, that kind of sounds like what it sounds like in my head, but I'm not used to saying it out loud, especially in front of my parents,
Yeah.
my in-laws, my ex-husband. So like really in front of the Indian community, you don't speak your mind. And I think that's where I started to realize in coaching, I get to not only hear my thoughts, but give a little bit more power to those thoughts to be able to actually say them out loud. When I started using those thoughts, that mindset, it started to become much more clear that something actually isn't working. That was the first thing. And then maybe there's another possibility. And that's where the idea of not working in medicine came about, and that the idea of that there could be something else I could do. And you're right, like there is an intuition inside of all of us. But I think when I heard it, it became so clear that I couldn't do anything but follow it. Like I felt compelled
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
go with that new way of thinking. It just felt.
So do you find yourself, I guess in situation like this, you have to find your own courage, right, to take those steps. How did you find that courage in you?
I think it's just coming back to hearing that voice inside that felt right, that felt like aligned with what it just felt right. I don't know how else to
Yeah.
put it. When
Yeah.
it feels right, then and then you feel that compelling feeling to sink into that thought and just really move forward with it. You can't go backwards. Like you
Yeah.
can't hear what you're now hearing so loudly. And I feel like all of us are sort of shaking our
Yeah.
heads. That makes a lot of sense because that's really what it feels like, all of a sudden it's you can't go back. And once you hear it, then you just have this force in front of you. And I think the other thing that helps is having a supportive family. My parents, my brother, nobody batted an eyelid. Like they just understood when I started talking about it that it sounded like such, I don't know, it just maybe it felt like more me than what I had been doing. And probably they'd been hearing about how it wasn't going well in my previous career. They didn't know anything about coaching, but at the same time, there's this inherent support within the family that I felt. And I think with that, it made sense. I
Yeah.
would say my husband also supported me at that time. There wasn't this idea that why are you doing this? It was more like, yeah, let's go for it. And he had entrepreneurial side to him as well. We were in the real estate kind of property investment stuff. And my dad is also an entrepreneur in addition to his, traditional engineering career. And so there was that was helpful. So it was around me. Yeah.
So I think, Manisha, you probably got lucky with having family support, particularly when Indian women, even if they go out there and start listening to themselves, there's a lot of time that the support that they need around them. It makes it very difficult. So I think you got lucky with the support that you got
Yeah.
to make that change.
I think you're right. And this is not to say that there wasn't any pushback, of course.
Because you
Any Indian any Indian mom and dad of their generation, they were born in the 40s and 50s, they're gonna have questions. They're gonna want to know that there's security. They're gonna wanna know that there's certainty,
Yeah.
and you can't give them that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's the challenge.
Yeah. Was there any like a fear or guilt attached to these challenge?
Well, it was 2020, and I am an infectious disease physician by training. So, inherently, there was a sense of obligation and a sense of guilt. You're leaving this career of infectious diseases when the world needs infectious disease physicians. So the beginning of the transition was a bit tumultuous in that I was out and then back in and out. And so it wasn't clear and it wasn't sort of linear
Right.
because I did go back into medicine as what's called a locums, which is like providing temporary physician services at various places where it's needed, where there's gaps, like all over the country.
Right.
So I felt compelled enough in 2020 that I couldn't leave completely. It wasn't a full clean break. Yeah. So I did have that guilt, that obligation, duty. These sort of things were definitely prevalent at that time. But the more I straddled the two, the more it became clear that even though it's the pandemic and even though there's a need, I don't have to fill that need. There can be others who feel more passionate about it, and I can go do the other thing that I feel most passionate about, where I think I'll be the most helpful
Yeah.
to others.
Yeah. So no, go ahead, Shelley.
Most of your clients, as a life coach, what are their challenges that you find it challenging to coach them?
Yeah. So the challenges that people come with usually fit into four buckets. One is career, one is relationships, either personal or otherwise. One is their health, and one is health and habits. I'm not exercising enough, I'm, overweight, etc. And then the last part would be sort of their relationship with money. And these are the four areas that most people want help with. But to be more specific, for example, I went to a workshop recently that I was giving. I was sort of doing a team building group of psychiatrists, and one woman contacted me afterwards. She's Indian. She said, your story made a lot of sense to me. I related to it, your struggles in life, the way that you have a hard time speaking up with your parents, speaking up with your family, telling people in your inner circle what you truly want. I'm not able to do that. And now I'm seeing, for example, that the generational trauma that I experienced growing up, I'm now transferring it to either my husband or my child. And I want it to stop now. I don't want to bring anger. I don't want to bring shame into my current life. I want to be free of that so I can give my daughter a better life, for example. So, like, that's a very specific challenge that she's coming to me with. And it makes sense that you would want to work with somebody for a longer period of time because there's so much to unpack and then reintroduce.
Right. That's interesting.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. Finally. So I'm a therapist by profession. So where do you see that you feel like you need to recommend them to a therapist? Because
That's a great question. Yes. That is something that happens regularly, actually. Sometimes there are clients who already know that they have anxiety or depression, for example, and we start coaching because they're regulated either by having a therapist before and they're now in a place that they want to take their life and sort of move it forward. But during coaching, we can unearth some of the old issues And sometimes the anxiety or depression can become more in the forefront. And being a physician and going through the training that I went through as a coach, it is part of our duty to recognize and maybe pause the coaching and recommend that somebody go either back to a therapist or start to see a therapist. And that's happened several times in the 4 years that I've been coaching, is that recognition is there, and then we have a frank conversation with the client and just remember that it's okay to have both, and it's okay to take a break from coaching and go back to therapy, and it's okay to come back to coaching when you feel that, your mind is able to process and able to
Mm.
take in new thoughts and move forward with those new thoughts, right? Like if you're just feeling too stuck, too anxious, too down, the new work that we do in coaching is not going to be effective. So that's where that line can be drawn, and we can go back and forth, and sometimes it's simultaneous and sometimes it's exclusive.
Yeah, because I see sometimes people are confused between life coaching and therapist because I come across that a lot because they've gone through coaching and then they come to therapy and then they go back to life coaching.
Yes.
So a lot of people are even not sure what would be the right fit for them, going to the therapist or the life coaching. And I usually tell, yeah,
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
think the best answer is try it. Try both. Why
Yes,
not?
yes,
You can
yes,
always see. You can always stop one, you can always go back to the other.
right. And I said, if you have something really pressing, sometimes you just need to get through that. Start with life coaching, get to see that if that you could help, they can help you solve the problem. But if it's something lingering like anxiety and depression, you have grown up experiencing something and you haven't really got, maybe you need something more, you know,
Yes.
like you just exactly what you just said. So I think that's where sometimes we can tell people like try both and see whatever works.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So true. So being a life coach specifically for Indian women, does that make it easier or does it make it just because that we can, being an Indian ourselves, we can resonate what they're going through and their emotions, right? But sometimes that also could be a little bit challenging. What is your experience on that?
So the coach training is, I think, where the skills come through and we have the tools to, okay, like if somebody is talking to me about what they're going through, let's say it's a fertility struggle, because I went through that for 4 years. It's not going to be uncommon for professional women to present with fertility troubles and have those challenges to talk about in coaching. Inherently, career women are older when they start trying normally, and that's when the troubles begin usually. And it can be triggering for me as well to listen to the stories. And at the same time, I think the way that I've been trained, I know that I don't need to, quote, jump into the pool with the client. And I know that I can keep my own thoughts coached behind the scenes. So I can self coach as the person is telling them or telling me their story. And I can really just remember that I'm here to listen to them. I'm not here to sort out my feelings in the session, but at the same time, it's the client is in the forefront always. And I can always drop into their own pain for them. And at the end of the day, all of us are just looking for somebody to listen to us and to let us have our feelings and our thoughts validated. And if I can keep that top of mind, my own thoughts and feelings, I can sort them out later.
Yeah. Yeah. That is so true. That is so true. And it's all like, we're three different kind of coach. Like Luthra is a therapist, you are a life coach, I'm a business coach. And at the end of the day, I'm telling you, it all sounds so much interconnected because even as a business coach, I can tell you that sometimes the blockage for their business growth is something personal that's affecting their life. And that's why they cannot reach the goals, even in their business career. So it's all about the clarity of mind and it's all about how good you feel inside and what are the inside of the struggles that you're going emotionally inside. And that's what we all are here to resolve that or help them resolve it, right? But I wanted to know, like, as working with Indian women, the struggle that I think all Indian women go through is like trying to be very pleasing, trying to live others' expectations. And we always have hard time saying no because culturally are been brought up that way. Like, you can't say no as little girls. If you grew up in India, that's more common than the kids that grew up here. But, So, how do you what do you think about that? What are your thoughts on that?
For sure. I think we were talking about earlier, there's that inner knowing, that intuition that we all have. There's the voices that we hear and the voices that we suppress, and then the thoughts that we actually say out loud. And I think that when we're faced with this part of life where we're in our 30s and 40s, we're becoming a little bit more aware of ourselves. I think there are thoughts that we can't ignore them anymore. And that's when people look for a coach or a therapist, right? We can't ignore the thing we keep hearing. It's getting louder and louder and louder. And every scenario where we're meeting the challenge, it becomes even more in the forefront. And so I think what happens is that people become less tolerant of being suppressed. And so they want out of that. They want out of that engagement, right? They want out of their own confinement that they put themselves in. But that doesn't happen until we get to a certain point in our lives. I think we're very happy to be confined because we think that's what we're supposed to do until a certain stage in our lives. And then we can't tolerate it anymore.
Yeah.
And even though speaking out and allowing other people to be disappointed is so hard for us, when other people are not approving of us, like our parents or our husbands or our in-laws, when they don't approve our choices, it's very hard for us.
Yeah.
Because we want to please. But at a certain point, our own confinement is too intolerable. And so then their disappointment, their disapproval, although it's intolerable, I think it becomes a little bit more tolerable.
Yeah. Even as our kids, like sometimes we
Sure.
even,
Yeah.
we think about them too. Like, okay, what are my kids saying about this? Or how are they judging us? So,
Yeah.
How do you find, like, how do you coach women who goes through that, and how do they like balance everything, right? Because what happens when you're suddenly are not pleasing anymore, you're suddenly, taking steps towards what's important for yourself. There is a chances that you're actually sacrificing somewhere else, right? And you always have to bring that balance into the family, because just because you're trying to enhance yourself, that doesn't necessarily means that you're pushing everything away that is important for you, as your family, as your, partners, as your kids and everything. So how do you coach that kind of balance, not being rebellious at the same time? Think about yourself.
So this is inherent in coaching with Indian women, right? Because in our Indian culture, there's very little of what we see outside of immigrant cultures or Indian cultures, which is, okay, we'll just cancel the parents. We'll just break our ties with the parents. Most Indian women want to maintain ties with their families. It's not an option to just abandon the family. So in this coaching in particular, it's already known that the client, I'll give you an example. She wants to tell her parents about the boyfriend, and she knows that the parents don't approve. And she still wants to date the boyfriend, and she doesn't want to cut ties with her parents. It's a classic, like common and recurring coaching scenario. And so what is she doing? She's telling me it's so hard to face them when I know that I'm going to get their disapproval. But it's also so hard to think about not being with my partner. Right. And so here we are with these two intolerable discomfort, this fear of disapproving and fear of separation from the partner. Both are negative emotions, both are uncomfortable. Neither is the one that the brain really wants to attach to. But at a certain point, like we were saying before, one of them is just becoming more and more intolerable. So it's not that we are going to be okay with fearing the disapproval of our parents. But in her case, for example, she's just owned the fact that if she's deciding that she wants to be with this guy and she's deciding that she wants to maintain ties with her parents, one of them is going to have to take a back seat. She's going to have to be okay feeling that uncomfortable feeling that she's no longer getting the approval of her parents. And once I tell her it's okay to have their disapproval and it's okay to be uncomfortable that they don't approve of you. I think what happens is I think the brain automatically goes into problem solving mode. Okay, so even if I'm uncomfortable when they don't give me their approval, here are the things maybe I can do to make it a better situation. And last night I watched the movie, A Nice Indian Boy, the Zarna Garg movie. Have you guys heard of this movie?
No.
Okay, I forget exactly the name, A Nice Indian Boy or something, and I won't give away anything, no spoiler alerts, but see the guy who's in this uncomfortable position rehearsing in the bathroom what he's going to say, to his parents. And I think that's another thing that we do often in our coaching sessions is like, what are the word tracks you want to use in front of your parents? And what can you expect them to say? Because you already know what they're going to say. You already know how your parents are generally going to react, or your husband, or your children, or whoever the third party is. You already know what to expect. So we're going to go in having exactly know what we're going to say. We know how they're going to react, and then we know our counter reaction in that moment too. So we rehearse this ahead of time. And in the movie last night, he was rehearsing in the mirror in the bathroom exactly what was going to happen, what they were going to say in return, and what he was going to say in return to that. So we do a lot of that as well. It's not role playing per se, but it's just imagining, or what is the word I'm trying to think of? Just vision. I don't know. Anyway, that's kind of another thing that we do a lot is let's make sure that we're prepared for these scenarios. And if you can't do it the first time you're in front of them, you can at least rehearse what you're going to say while you're in front of them and then get a lot more comfortable with what you're going to say so that when the time feels right, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time you're rehearsing it, it just escapes your lips.
Yeah. It's nothing different than, if you're presenting and you're going out and you're in front of people, you do want to rehearse first and then say what you want to say. So yeah, that mental repetition helps develop what you really want to say.
Also kind of brings the courage, right? Like, because when you're rehearsing it, it actually it builds the courage, and then it just makes it more sense. Like, you're going through different scenarios in your head, and then you know exactly how to present it once, you're taking that step. So it also builds the courage with that.
I think one of the challenges though between Shelley, what you said and what happens in coaching or the scenarios in coaching is that in a presentation, there's a deadline, there's a date. You have to say it on that day. In other scenarios, it's very personal and you get to decide the brain's tendency to want to delay, procrastinate, avoid. It's usually overtaking. That's the challenge is like how to
Today's not
override.
a good day. Like,
Yes.
they're not having a good time today. Like, okay, the food wasn't very good today. Let's not make another one.
Yeah. And I think that having the support of the coach, like oftentimes clients will come back and say, I had your voice in my head. And I tried to say what I wanted to say to my parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there any like a common myth or cultural belief that you often help clients unlearn? Because we've learned so many like cultural beliefs and myths that it must be hard for you to, help your clients unlearn those
Yeah.
beliefs, because that's like years worth of you have to brainwash all of that again.
I mean, one simple one is exactly what we're talking about. Speaking my truth is disrespectful,
Yeah.
right? Allowing for them to be disappointed or not approve, that's me being selfish. These are myths.
Yeah.
Now we know they're myths,
Yeah.
but we don't grow up with that mindset. We grow up with knowing that we're supposed to do what they say, and that's respect. You're supposed to be selfless, otherwise you're selfish.
So was it difficult for you to get out of those mindset? Because I'm pretty sure you grew up in a Indian family, right? All Indian families have their own myths, their own culture beliefs, and their own things, right? So when you're taking this path, you have to first cleanse yourself from all of those myths. So was that difficult for you to, because certain things are just nailed in our head, like, no, that's how it's supposed to be.
And I think that's where the discomfort comes. I mean, it's a very uncomfortable time when you're shifting. It's very, very hard to lead with faith, knowing like, okay, I know this is uncomfortable, but I also know that I'm not doing something bad. And I'm not being selfish. I'm not technically taking something from someone else, which to me is the definition of being selfish. I'm not taking for me. and leaving them in a worse position. It's not that at all. But that coming up against that time and time again and having to essentially coach myself as I'm moving forward with my new mindset, it's not comfortable at all. So it's not linear, it is challenging, and nobody should expect that it should be easy. But it is very simple, right? It's literally one shift of what your mindset is, unlearning and learning something else. If you technically look at it, remove one thought from your brain, insert another thought into your brain. When it comes down to it, it's super challenging. It's hard. It takes repetition. It takes self-coaching. It takes support from somebody outside of you, therapist or coach. And I think that's the only way to get through
Yeah.
it. But yeah, super hard.
And that's what I was going to add to this is like, it's always, remember to take that help from professionals because a lot of times we don't think that it's important or we feel like I don't want to get judged. And that's the other thing that, especially Indian women, we feel like we don't want to get judged or, I don't need any help. I'm not going to go to the therapist. I don't need a coach. I can probably just be myself and I'll be fine. We have that hesitation of getting that help. And I feel like that's so important to know. Even as a business coach, I'm telling you, in my entrepreneurial journey, I've been in business for 23 years. And if I go back and if I feel like if I knew back then that I could have got a business coach myself and we could have done so much better, so much faster. I could have I could rewind that and take that step now. But I just wish we would known. And same thing it is with life coach or a therapist, because a lot of time we hesitate to take that help. And I feel like that is so important. I do want to really emphasize on that at least make that call and because you don't need to struggle alone. There are people to help you with that. And of course our family, our friends is our backbone, but along with that we need that outside support to 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 break those barriers and help us reach where we want to be. So that's very important. But
It is important. And also it really begs the question, do I consider myself worthy enough to invest in that help?
yeah,
Not only the time, but the money.
yeah,
Because in the Indian culture, we invest in things that grow our wealth, education, properties, career advancement, homes, right? This investment is not something that we consider. It's not ever been part of our culture. It's changing now, but on the individual level, I think each person will have to ask themselves, am I worthy to invest in a coach? Am I worthy enough to invest in a therapist where maybe it's not going to be covered by insurance? These are very, very like deep personal questions that I think a lot of people, the answer will be no, this is not, I'm not worth it. I have to pay for my children. I have to pay for the house. I have to give money to my parents. I have to support other people. How could I possibly spend this money on myself? And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles in not only having the idea to hire help, but then actually following through with it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So well said. I couldn't have said it better way. It's so well said. Luthra, you have any questions?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
With this, I'm trying to get used to this. Yes.
No worries.
No,
No.
I'm just agreeing. I'm just agreeing with whatever she's saying, that it's very hard to take this step.
Yeah.
And I see that with my work too. It's a difficult to invest in our own self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially therapists. I mean, when we talk about with Indian culture going to therapists, like, the new generation have no issues with it, right? The new generation actually, I would say 90% of the new generation would have someone that as a therapist that they go and talk to. It's our generation that
Mhm.
don't reach out to a therapist as much as we should, because we all carry baggage, and I think we don't let it loose, and we don't think that it is important to have the therapist or it is important to really go through that. So that's one thing that barrier should be broke. It should break, that when you need help you really need to go and get that help.
Absolutely.
It's funny. I want to follow with that what you said. So we carry the baggage, We spill the baggage, we put it back in the bag, bag it up, and we keep on taking it out and packing back in, and we never take it out for good.
Yeah.
And that's where, Maneesha comes in and coach people, because it's so, so necessary now, the time, because we are in a very demanding world.
Mhm.
The world is asking us more than we can even, like,
Yeah.
it's taking so much out of us. We want to know everything. We are in that, what do we call, the learning time?
Yeah.
Know it all.
Know it all.
Right? We want to have the right answers for everything. So these are the world we are in. We want to be good parent. We want to be good children. We want to be everything. It's so much weight as a woman we carry, and it's even more weight on us now.
Yeah.
Manisha, I have a question for you. For your career related coaching, do you help them with their resumes, or is that just the behavioral changes? How do you, if someone comes to you with career kind of issues, what do you do with them? Like how do you approach it?
I think most people who want help in that part of their life are generally feeling confused or overwhelmed by the number of options, or they just don't have clarity on what they want to do next. They've already done the traditional, conventional path, and they know it's not working for them, just like me when I was working as a physician. And then some people just don't have that clarity, which is what I got when I got coached. I was like, oh, this is definitely what I want to do. It was very clear for me. But that clarity, I think, is where we focus most.
Mm.
And so people have I think a lot of people will say, I don't know what I want to do. And just that I don't know statement will keep you feeling stuck for so long that your brain is shut off from exploring. And so the first the first statement is always, I don't know is not even allowed, because we have to get out of the habit of saying I don't know. And so that is one thing that is very clear in coaching, is that I don't know is an answer that's not acceptable. We're going to have to work to dig into the next possible statement that comes from your brain. And so we have to get used to saying things out loud that maybe we were suppressing before. Again, going back to the same thing before.
Yeah.
All of us have ideas. All of us have these dreams. All of us have something else that we want to be doing.
Yeah.
But saying I don't know squashes the whole thing. So when we talk about career and we talk about confusion or overwhelm or just being stuck, I think the first step is removing the I don't know, owning that we do know, and then speaking about it. And in a safe space where there's a coach or a therapist, it's much easier to share your crazy ideas. My hands were in quotes just now, or this is a stupid idea, or this is never going to work. Like, we need to talk about them and give it a little space to breathe. And only then it can be possible, right? Like, I mean, I would have never become a coach if it had never been said out loud, or all these other amazing careers that we all have as women that are not traditional and conventional. That would have never happened, had we not spoken about them.
Is
But do
that
you
the
see,
decision-making tool that you have? Is that what it helps them, search their, I guess, the inner self or goal or dreams or careers?
Yeah. Yeah, the decision-making tool is definitely there for all four big aspects of life: career, relationships, health, wealth. It applies everywhere because it is not there to make a decision using the conventional decision-making tactics that we use, which is, a pros and cons list. It is there to help you sort out what uncomfortable feeling you get when you make choice A, and what uncomfortable feeling you get when you make choice B, and then answering the question, which of these is not tolerable? If you are no longer able to tolerate feeling misaligned, like something's not right, but also this fear of disapproval is coming up, well, maybe that misalignment feeling is just becoming too intolerable that you're now willing to tolerate that fear of disapproval or fear of failure.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Do you see a lot of shame with your work with the Indian women
I think it's impossible to work as a coach or a therapist and not
without
talk
shame?
about shame. I
And
mean,
I see that, like, for
yeah.
me, I see that first thing is shame. Like, even first getting the help, and then, you know, asking for help is even a shame, even getting to the coaching or therapist,
That's so true.
right? And how do you work through that
Yes, that's a
shame?
great question. Yesterday, this came up in a coaching session, and it was the woman had been in her medical career for 15 years, and she had been in this private practice for 8 years, and then for the last 2 or 3 years, things were not going well in her practice, and she was being asked to basically resign from her position, and she had felt this immense shame that they're telling me I am no longer respectable and that I'm not no longer a good doctor or whatever it was. And she felt a lot of deep shame, but the shame was not just about that scenario. She had had scenarios in her life in which she had a narcissistic parent. She had married a narcissistic partner and then divorced that partner. And so there was so much like from her past that was informing her current feeling that was again triggered by this workplace scenario. The shame was definitely not about just what was happening now, but also like compounded from all of her past experiences in life. And also, she's this brilliant physician who loves her career and loves her patients. So, as she was talking, I was saying, I heard you say that you're experiencing shame. But, guilt is I did something wrong, and shame is I am wrong. But is that even true? Because when the brain offers to you, I'm wrong, I'm not worthy, I am full of shame, we don't stop to question that. We just take it as true and then drop into that feeling of shame. So I think one of the things we do in coaching is we just slow down the entire process. Just because your brain says to you, you're wrong, can we just slow down and pause and ask, is that even true? Because when you ask her, is that true? She was like, I'm a great physician. I really care for my patients. There's no reason that she truly is in shame. It's just an offering from the brain that she just automatically agrees to because of her past experiences. And in a narcissistic relationship and a narcissistic family dynamic, of course, we're made to feel certain things that aren't actually true
Yeah.
by definition, right?
Yeah. It's like what Luthra said before, like the baggage that we carry, we bring, if we take it out, we put it back. We take it out, we put it back. It's exactly what it is, right? So,
So in coaching, we just slow down the whole process so that we get to the root of when do we start agreeing with our brain? Is that even necessary or accurate? Because we all have other thoughts about ourselves that certainly don't lead us to shame, but they're not loud enough most of the time.
so tell us, what are some daily small practices people can start to reconnect with their inner voice?
Gratitude journaling is something that most people will talk about. I do not talk about that with my clients. I talk about ownership journaling.
Mm.
I talk about how did I make that happen? So, for example, today I'm on a call with you guys. I have electricity, there's Wi Fi running, there's video, there's a computer. What was my role in making that possible? Not that I'm so grateful that I have the income that I have to have Wi Fi. No, there's something I did inherently to make sure that that was true. I was able to bring myself to this call at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock at night. I was able to be present. I was able to set behind all the things that happened today, meaning like tomorrow's tax filing day and like all these stresses that were in the day, right? There's something that I did to make sure that I was present in this call or in this podcast interview. And similarly, we all have things that we're doing on a daily basis. So I encourage people to make sure that they take stock of what they're doing well already.
Mm.
And there is such a long list
Yeah.
we tend to ignore. Even when it's just all I did was woke up and took care of the kids. Well, that's not a guarantee. Somebody who's severely depressed or just feels low or is feeling down on themselves doesn't necessarily get out of bed. They don't necessarily nourish their loved ones or themselves. They don't necessarily comb their hair or put on some clean clothes. They don't necessarily have gas in their car to drive themselves to work. Even when you're not doing something miraculous or really huge, there's so many wins in the day that we just gloss over. And it's so important to take stock of the things that we do every day that we do because we decided to. And I think it shifts our brain to looking for more things that we can be proud of rather than looking for the things that bring us those uncomfortable emotions
Yeah.
that we live in, right? Like our inner voice that we're talking to all day is usually pretty negative, but we have to flip that script. And the only way to do that is to keep reminding ourselves.
That's so fantastic. I like that what you said. That is really cool because yeah, like you said, a lot of people do a gratitude journal. I do gratitude journal, and honestly I like it, and because it changes the mood in the morning because you start thanking what the things are and you appreciate even like you said, waking up. Hey, I woke up, I'm happy, I'm blessed, I feel good. I'm awake. So starting that thought in your mind kind of like brings you all that positive energy. But I like what you said that we do so many little things and each wins that we need to be appreciated. And we have to think about it that you did it, like be proud of those moments, right? That's really amazing. Yeah, I like that.
I think what that helps us with as well is that we lessen the importance of external validation
Mm.
because then we're getting used to validating ourselves. Not that external validation is ever going to be, not exciting. Everybody wants to be validated from the outside, but we don't have to rely on it as much
Yeah.
when we're doing it for ourselves. And so that's why this practice I think is so helpful. And habit stacking, from I forget who coined that term, but like for example, there's a coffee cabinet, and when I open the cabinet, there's a metal bulletin board or magnetic board. And so then there's a list there that I can refer to every day while I'm brewing my coffee. So you can stack it with something that you do every day so that it becomes a habit. Um, and it doesn't have to be time consuming. It doesn't have to be formal. You don't have to type it or put it in your phone or write it down. You can even just do it in your head. But it doesn't have to be something additional that you add to your day, like I have to do this now. No, you just do it while you're making coffee or
Yeah.
chai.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so good. That's a really good tip you gave here. And I think in one of the previous episodes, we had talked about this, like, because this helps so much because, there's a world full of negative people. It's so easy to pull you down, but there's very little help to pull you up. And this helps just standing up for yourself, and this is very nice. I love it. I like it. I'm gonna try incorporating in my daily routine and make that change now. It's really good. And thank you so much, Manisha. This has been really inspiring and really uplifting. And I truly appreciate that you coming and sharing us this amazing journey of yours and encouraging and rewriting your path and the life to live a life that you intended to, right, and to be true to yourself. So it's an amazing. Thank you for joining us on our Global Desi Women. Thank you, Bhavna Luthra and Bhavana Shelley, for joining us as a co-host. I always love your input, and you bring a lot of charm and a lot of helpful information and wonderful questions to the show. So I appreciate both of y'all joining us as well. And to our listeners, if you were feeling stuck or overwhelmed or feel like you've been living for everyone else but yourself, we hope this conversation gave you the permission or the tools to start tuning into your own inner voice and listen to it, and hope this helps you in your life path. We'll be back soon with more inspiring stories from Desi women around the world who are breaking barriers and leading with heart. Until next time, be kind to yourself and others and trust your journey and keep choosing you. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.